It looks like recording now.
Okay.
So yeah.
Okay. Can you see my screen?
Yeah, it's coming. Yeah,
It's
now we
coming
can.
now.
Yeah, now we can.
Yes.
Yeah, so you can go ahead.
Yes. As I was saying, my colleague Tite will be taking us through this afternoon the history of ICLS, how it started, how it goes. So I'll not go through that. I'll go straight into the 19th ICLS. I'll talk about why the need to revise standards, the scope of new standards on work statistics, then the concept of work, which Eve talked about yesterday. I'll be very brief on that. Employment, labor force and labor under-utilization, other forms of work, and the main changes and challenges. Are my slides changing? Hello?
Yes, they are changing.
Yeah,
Yes,
okay.
they're changing.
Okay, right.
You can also use the arrows on your computer. It will be faster.
Okay.
Maybe. Okay.
Why the need to change? One of the reasons why it was important to start thinking of changing standards, it's the evolving policy needs. It is now, government now agreed that employment is a pivotal means of reducing poverty and improving livelihoods and promoting overall social and economic development. And also there's a need to integrate all forms of work, that is care work, volunteer work. So that is one of the reasons. The second reason why it was important to start thinking of changing, the changing labor market patterns of work. For example, in the market economies, employment is really associated with payment. And usually whenever I start this kind of presentation, I ask, like even if ourselves, the moment we talk about a job, looking for a job, the first thing we think about is a salary at least. We don't talk about jobs and we think about just going to fetch wood and water. It's about being paid. And in the more developed countries, employment takes the form of wage, and also self-employment is in small and medium-sized market enterprises. However, in the less developed countries, traditional modes of production based on subsistence agriculture, fishing, and gathering continues to coexist with the expanding markets. Another reason why the need of revision, the productivity, scope of employment. For example, I mean, looking at, if you look at how countries used to measure employment, or some of them are measuring employment, their employment is so broad, combining so many activities, those which are paid and those which are not paid, because of the history of trying to link employment and the production statistics. So that one limits the usefulness of labor force statistics as a means of monitoring performance of labor market. I mean, if you include people who are fetching wood and water as employed, it reduces that meaning of monitoring labor market and actually developing policies towards jobs. This is what I've been talking about. That the definition of employment that is based on production boundary in 2008, it included different people, different groups which are heterogeneous. You can imagine combining someone who's getting paid with a person who's just doing his own production work. Subsistence farming, fetching wood and water. These are two different groups of people. In my previous work, when I was working with the NSO, we are debating this. And one person gave me an example that was in South Africa. He was from the civil society. He told me, can you imagine, I wake up in the morning, I have 3 children. I wake up, I can't fetch water, then a kilometer away, then I go to look for wood, come and boil the water with a few potatoes, which I've grown in my backyard. Hardly, feeding my kids. We can't even get satisfied. Would you call me employed? And indeed, we are classifying them as employed currently in the old definition. So these are two different groups which are heterogeneous to be grouped together as in one group as employment. There are also a group of volunteer work and unpaid apprentices. However, in practice, some countries never included all those activities at the same time. So countries applied the standard differently. They would pick and choose which activity to include. Some would include fetching of wood and water, others would not. Would include subsistence, others would not. So it became a bit difficult to compare country to country. Again, as I mentioned earlier, that this one, it is actually very, if you have this broad group, it's difficult to really to develop policies which are encouraging employment as a main source of income or as an engine of economic development. It is so difficult to assess the linkage between employment and poverty if you've combined all these a heterogeneous group in one category. Again, we couldn't distinguish them, different forms of work, because you would find that countries would say, include that, without separating them. So you couldn't analyze the participation of an individual in different forms of work and how they interact. You would find that we get involved in different forms of work, that I have my main job, I could be having a secondary job, but also when I go home, I look after my cattle or I grow my own food. In the previous, the previous standard, you could not measure that. to see the interaction between these different forms of work. Another reason why it was important to change partial activity coverage. As I'm saying that the old center does not address all forms of work. They exclude services. So we couldn't measure the other satellite accounts. But this framework, as you will see, it has got different forms of work. Another reason why indeed we needed to revise, it was the insufficient measure of labor utilization. As you know, the concept of unemployment is very narrow. Like in many development countries, unemployment benefits do exist and other social safety nets. So large segments of population must perform, don't bother to perform subsistence activities if they have another way out of surviving, unlike in the developing countries. As you know, to measure unemployment, we just look at two conditions. You have to satisfy two conditions, that is seeking work and being available. So, which misses, it will never tell you the whole story for someone who's discouraged, who has got some unmet need of employment, but you cannot qualify to be unemployed because it does not satisfy the two conditions. So it's a very narrow concept. So we encourage, as you will see, to measure, to include other indicators to assist the unemployment rate. I think that is what I was talking about. So, the scope of new standards. We have different forms of work. Where we have employment, own use production, volunteer work. Then we have extra measures of underutilization. It's not only unemployment. You saw Eve yesterday. He talked about time-rated unemployment and potential labor force. Then, of course, we'll talk about the labor force status. Then, data collection programs, the population coverage. You talked about the age limit, different sources, periodicity of collection, and to talk about the different indicators, extra indicators, which we'll talk. I'll show you the LUs, LU1, LU2, and LU3. Let's now look at the framework itself. For the first time, we defined work as any activity performed by person of any sex and age to produce goods or to produce services for use by others or for own use. That is the first time we defined work. And it is irrespective of legality, context, and person's status. It's consistent with the scope of productive activities. And of course, it's within the SNA general production boundaries because it covers also the services. So it gives us a complete account, that is the national accounts and also satellite accounts. As you'll see as we go, we'll talk about that. This time work is aligned with the general production boundary. And you've talked about this yesterday, that activity must result in production of goods and services, and the activity must fulfill the third person criterion. That is the kind of activity, it must be possible for someone else to perform the activity on one's behalf. That is, so activities like sleeping, which someone cannot do it on your behalf, it's not work. Activities like going to enjoy leisure, which someone cannot do on your behalf, that is not work. And it can be performed in any kind of economic unit, that is market units, non-market units, and household producing goods and services, irrespective of whether it is a formal or informal nature or legality of the activity. This is one slide, I think, which Eve's went through yesterday, but we'll start, I will go through it again. This summarizes the framework. We start on the blue upper part, that is work. And the first part of, the first way of doing our classification, we have to look at the intended destination of that kind of activity, whether it is for own use or for use by others. That is the first level where we...
Peter.
Pardon?
Yes, can I stop you? I thought it was only on my computer, but I think for other colleagues also, your slides are not moving.
They're not moving?
You are still on the content, so I don't know what is happening.
Okay. And now?
Now they are moving, yes.
Oh, sorry, because I have two screens here.
Yeah, so if you have two screens, you need to know which screen you are moving.
Okay.
Yeah. Now they are moving.
Now they're moving. Sorry.
Yeah.
You would have... Okay.
So you're moving the non-connected screen. Yeah, yeah. Okay, so now go ahead. Now they are moving.
Okay.
Yeah.
As I was saying, when we are classifying work, the first stage is to determine the destination of that work, whether it is for own use or for use by others, its final destination. For own use, of course, we have goods and services. Then the second level is to determine the transaction, whether it is for pay or without pay. If it's for pay, now that is what we classify as employment. The rest, own use production and others without pay, volunteer work, is no longer regarded as employment. Previously, what we regarded as employment was goods from own own use production of work, production of goods, goods and services for pay, goods and services as unpaid trainee, goods and services of other activities, and goods for volunteer work. They were regarded as employment because all this was under the production boundary. But for the new standard, only work for pay, the blue part here, goods and services, which are for pay, is now what regarded as employment. And this is our reference concept for the labor force statistics. This is the major difference between the old and the new. Remember the old, we included all that red boundary, which included goods and services for own use production, and also, no, rather goods of own use production, only goods, no services. Then goods and services for unpaid trainee work and other activities, like compulsory work, which are usually done by either, in some countries, prisoners. They send them to do some work. And for volunteer work, only goods were considered as employment. The new standard, only work for pay.
And Peter, could you specify, so when you say the previous and the new, so to which timeline or which manual you're referring?
Here we are referring to the 13th ICLS, the 1982 ICLS. That was the old one now, and that is what you are using currently now in Afghanistan. You are considering these kind of goods and goods which are on use production as employment. I don't think you've put in a volunteer work. It's not there in your questionnaire. I don't think it's there. And I think you have unpaid apprentice. They're there. So that is the old standard of the 13th ICLS, which was adopted in 1982. But 30 years later, in 2013, the 19th ICLS happened, and this is what we are talking about now, the new one, which, because of the reasons I talked about earlier, changes were discussed, and it was adopted in 2013. Is that okay? Clear? Okay, I'll continue. And with the new framework, we know that people can engage in all different forms of work. You can engage in work for pay, but you can also produce your own goods for your own use and services. You can get involved in as unpaid trainee worker, and you can do volunteer work. So you can be involved in all these forms of work. And for this new framework, at least we can see the interaction between different forms of work, which we couldn't see in the old framework. Yesterday, Yves talked about employment. How do we define it? Again, I'll briefly go through it. Employment is work performed for others in exchange for pay or profit. That is now employment. It's no longer work which you do to produce your own goods and services. It includes many types of people: self-employed people, those who are running their own business, casual workers, employees, contributing family workers, assisting family members. So for assisting family members, you could be, in some countries, a father who's having a job, when he's away, is allowed to send his son or one of his kids to stand in for the person, to stand in for the father. And if the kid is doing that, or the son is doing that, he's in this category of assisting family members. But we also have contributing family workers, those who are helping unpaid in the family business. So those are also included in employment. And the type of pay is generally monetary, but it can be in kind. Again, this one re-emphasizes what I've been talking about, that the previous scope covered all activities within the SNA production boundary. It was regarded as employment. It included goods for own use production work, work for pay, unpaid trainee work, other work activities, and volunteer work, or only goods we are regarded as employment. But of course, in reality, countries never covered. Each country would decide what they would put in. Some would put in some activities from, maybe they would include subsistence farming, but not fetching of wood and water. Others would not include some activities of unpaid training. So in reality, countries were doing different things, which were so difficult to compare. But for the new one, see, for the new one, employment is only work for pay, as I said. So the changes. Employment is narrower. The new definition is no longer broad as it used to be. So in theory, there will be a lower number of people employed and higher number of people who are unemployed. But of course, in reality, it depends on the country, the existing practices. For countries which originally were not including subsistence farming as employment, the impact will be very low. But for countries where they have a big group which is involved in a own use production, the changes could be, the impact would be very high. And what is the same, that employment is still the reference concept for the labor force. That is, we start from those who are employed, then we classify them first, then those who are not in employment, we test for their job searching activities and availability to determine whether they are unemployed. Again, Yves talked about this yesterday. So working age persons who are in the reference week, that is 7 days, who are engaged in any activity to produce goods or produce services for pay or profit. And there are two groups. There are those employed at work and employed not at work. Those who are employed at work, it's a group those which worked for pay or profit for at least 1 hour during the reference week. But there's a group which have jobs, but they were not at work for some reasons or other. For example, because of working time arrangements, you know, there are some jobs where you work this week, but you don't work the following week, where you have flexi time. So we could catch you during the week when you are not at work because of that work arrangement. So that group is also employed. And there are those who are temporarily absent, who are expected to return from work. Let's say you on leave, but you'll be going back to work. So what are the main updates? They've been refined short reference period for measurement. That is now a reference for 1 week. So we no longer talk about 1 day, but at least now the reference is 1 week. And the concept is restricted to work for pay, profit, that's a major one. So you'll see when TITE presents the new guidance to establish the main intended destination of activity, that is to determine whether the goods are for sale or for own use. We have them in the questionnaire. If you have time, TITE will take you through the model questionnaires. Then it's a simplified guidance to determine temporary absence. Before it was a bit complicated to determine who's temporarily absent and who's not. But this time around, it has been simplified where we look at job attachment assessed using reasons for absence. And for certain reason, we check the duration when you are coming back, or if you continue to get salary to determine if you are temporarily absent. And we've retained the 1 hour criteria. Then you can talk about the notion of pay or profit. For payment or profit, we mean wages or salaries for time worked or work done, or profits derived from sales and part of goods or services produced. But we exclude production intended for mainly for own use. Even if you sell part of it, but if it's intended for own use, we don't regard that one as remuneration. And we accommodate different pay periods or incomes or old income. You could be doing a work, you could have done work, but they still owe you. Again, that is payment. And it can be directed to the person performing the work or indirected to the household member. As I said, you could be assisting in a family business or assisting family member where you are replacing a family member who's away from work, his work. Again, that one we regard it as payment. For temporary absence from employment, you will see in the questionnaire, even in the Afghan questionnaire, they have reasons why someone was absent. Now, it has been modified a bit that for reasons for reasons like personal sick leave, annual leave, maternity leave, we regard you as employed. We don't need to test. We don't do any other test. Once you give these reasons, you are regarded as employed straight away. But for these other reasons, like personal absence due to education leave, parental leave, care of others, strikes, reduction in economic activities, bad weather, mechanical, electrical breakdowns, we need to check first if you'll be back within 3 months or you continue to get a payment, salaries, to regard you as being employed. Otherwise, if you fail this test of returning to work within 3 months or continued payment, getting a salary, then we don't regard you as employed. For self-employment, it's important to check whether your production is intended for mainly for use by other units, or if it's for own use, it's not employment. So it's important to check the intended destination, whether it's for use by others. Otherwise, if it's for main use, for own use, we don't take it as employment. It will be for your own use production of goods.
Peter, sorry to interrupt. In the previous slide, you go to the previous slide. And so the categories that you have mentioned, bad weather, or especially the electronic breakdown or ICT problems. So most of the time they are temporary problems.
Yeah.
And then that's also unemployed?
No, we just check for them. We check first if you are going to go back to work within a short period of time. Let's say, actually it is less than 3 months. But if it takes more than 3 months to go back and you are not receiving a salary, then we don't regard you as employed. But as you say, if it's temporary and they say within 1 month you'll be going back to work, or you continue to get your salary, then you are employed. Because we know that in some countries, they can use these reasons and you stay out of employment for a long time without actually getting your salary. So it's important to check first whether you are going back to work, you are assured of going back to work within 3 months, or you continue to get your salary, even if you're not at work.
Okay, Peter, so just to confirm, so they have two conditions. One, the time, it should be less than 3 months,
Yep.
or another, they should get paid or get their salary. But
Yep.
in case the problem is short term, suppose it is 1 month, but they are not getting paid. So, but they'll go back after 1 month.
Yep.
But during this 1 month, they are not getting paid. So should it be included in employed or unemployed?
You will be employed so long as it's less than 3 months.
Okay, okay.
So long as it's less than 3 months, you'll be employed, even if you're not getting. But if you are not, if it's longer than 3 months, at least you have to be continuing getting a salary to be regarded as employed.
Okay, thanks, clear.
Yeah, it's one of the two. But at least for if you are not being paid and it's more than 3 months, you are out of employment. But if you are, if it's less than 3 months you are in, even if you're not being paid. But if you are not being paid, if it's more than 3 months and you're not being paid also, then you're out. But if you are being paid, even if you are more than 3 months, you are in.
Yeah, so just to add, so the sequence is usually the time, because, you know, there are people who are also employed and they don't get paid, you know, that's another criteria. So the first sequence is the time. If you know you are going to return to your job within 3 months, you are employed. And then if that condition is not met, then we will check the salary. Because even if you stay away for longer than 3 months, but you continue to receive your salary, then you are brought back in employment. That's how the sequence it goes. Thanks.
Thanks, Tito. I think we had gone through the self-employment. For labor force and labor under-utilization, Eve talked about this yesterday, but we'll go through it again. As we said, the labor force, it includes both employment and unemployed. Then we have the other category, which is outside the labor force. That is where we start to classify the working age population. Then among the employed, there are those who are in time-related unemployment. That portion, they also get into labor underutilization. And there's a group here outside the labor force. There's a group which is seeking but not available, and the group which is available but not seeking. It has got also some attachment to the labor force, rather to the labor market, which is now formed the labor underutilization group.
So just to curious, so labor under utilization is the concept is to understand the pressure on the labor market. That's what we can use for the policy.
Yes.
This statistics.
Unmet need of employment, unmet need of employment, because this group who are employed, there are those who are in time under, they want to work more. They want to work more, but they don't have enough work, but they really want to work more hours. So they have that, they still have that labor to sell, which is not utilized. Then there's a group here which is seeking but not available, and a bigger group which is available but not seeking because they are discouraged. They think they cannot get a job anymore. They've been looking for a long time. And I think that is a bigger group, which is available to work. If they get a job, they will start immediately, but they're not seeking. Who are not in unemployment because of the definition, but we know that they are putting some pressure on the labor market and they will be available to work. So
Peter,
hello?
Where will we put those who are working for their self-sustenance, i.e. like working in agriculture sector? Whether we will put them in employed or outside the labor force?
Those who are working in agriculture.
Yeah, working for their self-sustenance, not for the profit or pay.
Those who are producing for their own use.
Yeah.
We check first if they are looking for work. If they are looking for employment, they will be here.
Okay.
If they say they are looking for work and they are available to get a paid job, because you find that they are They are doing their subsistence farming, but they're also looking for work and they are available to get a paid job. If you ask them and say, this is the best, actually, the good part with this framework, because that group we used to put them in employment without asking them about whether they are looking for a paid job or not. But now we do ask them if they are looking for paid job. If they say yes, say, okay, are you available? During the reference period, they say yes, they will be unemployed. Otherwise, they would be here outside the labor force. But of course, hello?
So Peter, there are some, I guess, some gray areas when you're categorizing. So like in cases, like in context of Afghanistan, there are areas which is insecure, and there might be the demand to work, but because of the security, they are not available to work. And so that's one point. And other, like there are sectors which is not like illegal sector, like narcotics and other cultivation activities. So people are engaged there. And how we include it in these categories?
Let's start with what the first group you talked about. That because of they are available, they are not available, but they want to work and they could be sick. But because of insecurity, they are not available, right? That is the first group we talked about. That they are available to work. No, they want to work, but they are not available because of insecurity, right?
Yeah. Yep.
Yes. And that is why actually this we are saying that the unemployment rate does not tell the entire story. That is why we are adding actually the potential labor force, which captures that group. The group which is seeking but not available, and also the group which is available but not seeking. You will see that we have other indicators we generate to show that. So we are discouraging a country to just report only one indicator as unemployment rate, but to include these other indicators, which takes into account the potential labor force. Does that answer you? So yeah, if you use the old standards of just looking at only unemployment, yes, there will be a gray area of those ones who we just live outside the labor force, when actually they are putting pressure on the labor market. That is a group which is available but not looking, or they are looking but they are not available because of some other reasons. There could be different reasons why they are not available. Others are ladies who would like who don't have anybody to look after their young children. They might not be available, but they want to work and they're really seeking work which is convenient for them, where they can actually look after the children and also work. But they might not be available because of those reasons. And that is a group we are interested in to cover under the labor under-utilization.
Hello, Peter.
Hello.
First, I apologize for the late attendance and the training. I was busy in a meeting. Well, it's not clear for me, but the labor under-utilization, I think it is including the underemployment, unemployment, and potential of labor force, yeah?
Yes.
Are you correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. This is the group here. It includes those who are under time-related underemployment, those who are unemployed, and part of, there's a group outside the labor force, that is a group which is seeking but not available, and those who are available but not seeking. It's a wider group. So this is indicators which would assist us to not to report only one unemployment rate which is so narrow, which only looks at a smaller group when actually there's other groups with unmet employment needs. Again, the labor force concept. Let's walk through it.
And sorry, Peter, to interrupt. And how about the illegal sector, that those who are employed in illegal sector or in armed?
As we said, employment doesn't go into legality or whether it's legal or legal. So those who are in illegal activities, once they report there that they are working, they are in. So with employment, we don't, irrespective of the legality of the activity, which so long as it's for pay, it's in. But of course, stealing is not. Stealing, you are not producing anything, but all these activities, because of the laws of the countries, there could be that we're not allowed to sell that, we're not allowed to sell this. People get involved in those kind of activities. But stealing is not employment. Peter, you can chip in also.
Yes, definitely. You know, stealing, because it is not yet included also in national accounts. So that's why we definitely don't count it also in employment. So obviously, because the national accountant assume that there's no good is created and even no services is created. But for illegal activities, as Peter mentioned, we always ask the questions, but we don't ask whether something is illegal. So somebody will tell you that he was selling things, and you just take it that way. And he can tell you, you know, I was selling product of my field, and that's what you are going to report. So we also have to avoid putting questions that may push the interviewees or oblige them to not reporting. That's why our questions have to be neutral, so that we can capture those type of activities as well. We don't care about whether they are illegal, and we don't ask about it. We just ask what the person has been doing, if it's for pay or profit. Thanks.
Thanks, Titi. So we can expand further, talk about the labor force concept, which refers to the current supply of labor for the production of goods and services in exchange for pay or profit. Since it's a supply of labor, it includes both employed and unemployed, because these are the ones who are willing to sell their labor. And of course, a group which is willing to sell their labor, one group could be employed, their labor is in demand. And of course, there's a group which remains unemployed and seeking. So that forms the labor force. Now focuses on the work transacted for pay, profit. So all this group, the linkages work for pay. Those who are unemployed, they'll be looking for work for pay. And employed, for them, they already have the job which is being paid. And when it's measured over a short reference period, it provides a snapshot picture of labor market in a given point of time. So we can monitor labor market responses to economic cycles at least if it's work which has got this transaction for pay. Again, it's a recap of yesterday, that when we have a priority rule, which employment takes precedence over the activities, that is employment, we first check for employment, then check for unemployment, then the residue goes into outside the labor force. So people cannot be in two categories. You cannot be in employed and at the same time unemployed. Or you cannot be unemployed and outside the labor force. So for example, a student who says he's looking for work and is available, even if he's still going to school, he will be regarded as unemployed. And for someone who's employed, even if he's looking for a better job somewhere and is available for that better job, he will first is regarded as employed. So employment takes precedence over unemployment, and unemployment takes precedence over being outside the labor force.
Peter?
Hello.
How about those who are involved in the barter transaction? Whether they come on under the labor force or outside the labor force?
Barter transaction will be employed.
Yeah.
You'll be employed.
Okay.
It's in the barter.
But if there is no pay or profit, only exchange of goods.
But I think so long as there's that exchange,
Okay.
that transaction, it will be employment. The only division for someone not being an employee is whether these goods are mainly, if it's intended for the market, or if it's intended for its own use. If it's intended for your own use, even if you do some little of barter, then you will not be employed. But if it's your if the main intended destination is for others, then you are employed. But if it's for your main intended destination is for your own use, so we know that some people can sell a few of their products. If they're just selling a few of their products, but their main intention was for their own use, then they are not employed. So if your main intended use is to sell, even if you sell using barter system, exchanging barter, then you will be employed. Okay. But of course, if your intended, it's the main intended destination is for your own use, once you barter a few, then you are not. So the boundary between employment and own use production is what is the main intention, whether it's for own use or used by others. Then we discussed this yesterday. Yeah, we start with the working age population. Then you look at the employment, 1 hour quaternion, if you are engaged within a short reference period. Those who are engaged, they will be employed, they will go down to employment. Then we check without a job for pay, profit, not at work. If no, then we check for temporary absence. If they are, then they go in. Another group, not employed, we check for seeking and availability. If they qualify within these two, then they go into unemployment. If they fail any of these, that if they're not seeking outside, or if they're not available, they're outside the labor force. I think this one is clear. Then the labor force is those who are employed plus those who are unemployed. Labor underutilization, we've talked about it. Again, refers to the mismatch between labor supply and demand, which translates into unmet need for employment among the population. It refers to employment work, we refer to work, and it focuses on issues of insufficient labor absorption for monitoring labor markets. This is a diagram to show what we discussed earlier. We have the labor force, which include employed and unemployed. Then we have outside the labor force. And among the employed, there are those who are time-rated unemployed, which you put into labor underutilization. Unemployed, they also under labor underutilization. Then the potential labor force, which has got the two groups, seeking but not available. There are those who are available and not seeking. So that entire group falls under those who have got unmet need for employment, which is they've got some kind of labor which is not utilized. This one talks about the changes. Old standard refer to time rated.
Sorry, Peter.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. What about not gainful employment?
You mean, of course, with labor underutilization, there's a group which you don't cover, like being an, for example, a doctor who's working as a taxi driver. That group, we have not been able to put measures in. I don't know, Tite, whether we have now, it's being developed, those kind of measures. Tite?
Not yet. Not yet.
Mm.
Not yet. So these are what we call the various form of underemployment. So we have the three of them. We have time-related underemployment because you work less hours than you would like to and you are available for. You have income-related underemployment, and you have skills-related underemployment. So the gainful concept would be fit into what we call earning or income-related underemployment. The reason why we don't have international standard is because the concept of the value of an income is not the same for every country. So somebody may have $100 and it's a good salary for a medical doctor, but in another country, it may not be a good salary. So we don't have a standard concept on what income is good or is gainful. And it's difficult to compare per countries what income is gainful. So that's why we don't have international standard yet, but countries can measure. Countries can assume that a medical doctor should be having $2,000 a month. If a medical doctor is working less than that, then you can use that. The only difference is that we can't compare those statistics internationally because the values of money is not really the purchase power of money is not the same. So you can't compare. The same with also skills related. In some countries, to work as a cleaner is a bad thing. In other countries, it can be actually a high level thing, you know. So those two are not comparable. So that's why we don't have international standards for this income related underemployment or gain, you know, not gainful employment, or also skill-related underemployment. But there are continuous discussions on this. We have recently issued standard on what we call skills mismatches. So there will be progress in the future on these areas as well. Thanks.
Thanks, Tito. So with the old standards refer to only time-rated unemployment, but not potential labor force. When you talked about labor underutilization, unemployment rate was typically the only underutilization indicator published, with some exceptions. Now, the new standards recognize the need to extend the range of indicators while retaining unemployment. I think this one I'll skip because we've talked about it yesterday, about the unemployed person. That is, again, we start with the employment. Those who are not in employment in the last 7 days, and they carried out activities to seek work in the past 4 weeks or 1 month, and they are available for, they are available in the reference week or in the short subsequent period of 2 weeks. Then we have examples of job search activities. The kind of examples: active job search, that is arranging for financial resources, looking for land, seeking assistance, registering, applying to employers. These are examples of job search activities. We've talked about the potential labor force a lot. I'll move ahead. This shows the degree of pressure they are putting on the labor market. The first two, that is seeking employment but not available, we believe that they are putting more pressure on the labor market compared to those who are not seeking employment but want to, and they are available to work. And of course, these ones are putting more pressure compared to those who are not seeking and not available but want to work. And those who do not want to work at all, they don't put any pressure on the labor market. So the first two are the ones who go into the potential labor force, which believe that they are putting pressure on the labor market. Time-rated unemployment, I think Ibs covered it yesterday. That is a well-known indicator. I will not go through it again. There are examples of the questions which you can use. Tite will handle this one when he goes through the questionnaires to give you examples of the kind of questions you can use to capture this. I'll just talk about the extra indicators which we generate from all these potential labor force. We've got some indicators which you can generate. As we said earlier, the labor force is employed plus unemployed. Then the potential labor force is a group which is part of those who are outside the labor force, but they're seeking and not available, or available not seeking. As you know, this is the common indicator, LU1, which is the unemployment rate, or the unemployed. Then now we have another one which you can create, LU2, where you add those who are in time-rated unemployment to those who are unemployed to create indicator LU2. Then LU3 is another indicator which you can generate, which is where you add those who are unemployed to the potential labor force. You add the unemployed plus that. Then finally, LU4, which has all the components of labor underutilization, which is time-related unemployment, the unemployed, the potential labor force. These are the other extra indicators you can generate to assist to explain what is happening in the labor market compared to the LU1, which is the unemployment, which has been the only indicator so far, which some countries report. This is how generated them. Unemployment rate is person in unemployment divided by the labor force. Then LU2, that is the combined rate of time-related unemployment and unemployment. We'll add persons in time-related unemployment plus persons in unemployment divided by the labor force. Then we have the combined rate of unemployment plus the potential labor force. This one is persons in unemployment plus the potential labor force. Then here, you note this, it is the extended labor force. The extended labor force is the denominator which has the labor force plus the potential labor force. Then the last one, LU4, the composite measure of labor underutilization, which has got all the components. It is person in time-related unemployment plus persons in unemployment plus potential labor force divided by the extended labor force. So these are extra indicators you can generate, which this framework allows us to do to complement the unemployment rate, because we know that the unemployment rate doesn't tell us the entire story of what is happening, because it's a very narrow indicator. Remember, we have now, hello? Any question?
Yeah, I have just a little confused for me. And when we see the formula of the LU4,
Just go back.
Yeah. And the LU4, we consider person and time related underemployment, but we didn't consider this population and the extended labor force. It means we added the population and the above, but we didn't consider the denominator as
Force. Extended. Because the labor force here, the labor force has got that component. You see the labor force?
Yeah.
The extended
Okay,
labor
just
force, because the labor force has got employed and the unemployed, and the employed, the time-rated unemployment is part of the employed labor force. So it is in this denominator already.
Yeah, thank you, clear.
Clear now. Okay. Then we have producers of goods for own use. We can also get some indicators. Remember now, we have all forms of work where we have own use. Production of work is no longer in employment, but doesn't mean that we don't collect the data. We encourage that data to be collected, to measure that. And it includes all persons of working age who during short reference period performed any activity to produce goods for own final use. And this forms part of the labor input into the production of, within the SNA production boundary. Then providers of service, for own use. We also encourage that to collect this information. Of course, if you can collect it during using different frequencies. At times you don't need it all the time. Let's say if you have a quarterly survey, you can collect these other forms of work once, or volunteer work. At times some countries take 4 years to collect. So you can decide as a country the frequency you will do. You'll get these other forms of work. And this one includes all persons of working age who during a short reference period performed an activity to provide services for own use. Of course, we know that women do most of this work at home, looking after the sick, cooking, doing shopping. So all those services for own use. We need to be able to measure that. And these are the different activities under the goods. You have goods produced or processed for storage, like from agriculture, fishing, hunting, gathering, from mining, forestry, firewood and other fuels, fetching of water, fetching of wood, household goods manufactured, build your own dwelling or doing major repairs, all those goods for your own use. Then under services, you have managing the household and accounts, buying goods, transporting of them, preparing of food, serving, cleaning, caring for children. Those are the services. So we can also generate those indicators like head counts of participation rate. For example, subsistence food stuff producers, you can get the head count, we can also get the rate. And the denominator there is the working age population for all these. On use provider of services, you can get the head count and also the rate. And of course, for other national accounts, you can get volume of work, like in hours actually worked. So it's important. You will see in the questionnaire that whenever we look at the activity, we also ask hours of work, hours we spent during these activities. There's unpaid training work, that is activities to produce goods and services for others performed without pay in order to acquire workplace experience or skills. This is another, I don't know whether it's very common in Afghanistan, but in some countries it's really common where people go and work without pay for them to get workplace experiences or skills. Is it common in Afghanistan? Hello? Hello? Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you, so I hope they can hear you too.
Hey, I was asking if it's common in Afghanistan to.
Peter, I don't have a very clear idea how common or uncommon do you buy, but there are some internship students that they have some like from I'll give you an example. So from the Faculty of Economics, from Statistics Department, every year students comes to our office for 3 months and they are learning, they're working, but we don't pay anything for them. So that's usual, but I don't know how common it is in terms of the percentage or things like that.
Okay. It's one form of work which need to be measured. Then volunteer work. This is non-compulsory activities performed without pay to produce goods and services for others. And I think we are producing new guidelines for this part. It will come out soon. So we'll communicate that. The guidelines are ready. So this is just a summary of the main implications of the changes. What this framework gives us, it's participation in different forms of work can be measured and reported on. That's a good thing. Better separation of different activities, which will allow more meaningful analysis. That is employment now closer to the concept used for policymakers. Because we know that when people are planning for employment in employment policies, they don't plan for people to get jobs of fetching wood and water and those kind of own-use production. Indeed, they develop policies for people to get jobs, decent jobs for pay. So now, at least if you use this new definition, it will be better aligned with what the policymakers are really trying to achieve. And more comprehensive coverage of people's activities, both in forms of work and additional labor underutilization indicators, which has got a major gender relevance, because women's group used to complain that their work is not measured. The kind of work which women do, it's not considered as work, it's not measured. But at least now it has been brought into the framework. All the above only possible if the standards are implemented. So we can all achieve this if we indeed implement the standards. So employment can be lower, expected to be lower for countries which have been including at least, which have got a bigger proportion of those engaged in own use production. But for countries which didn't do that before, there won't be a big impact on this. Of course, there are challenges when you are going to implement this. You have to be able to communicate it to your users. If there's a break in series, when the survey is changed, you need to be able to communicate it early enough to the users. You need to have a good testing strategy to provide information. Often there are national targets for indicators. I mean, employment operation ratio and targets would be for odd measures. So communication has to happen to the users when you are implementing the changes beforehand. So you need to update the questionnaire. You need to decide which forms of work are covered at which frequency. So these are the kind of challenges when you are starting to implement these changes. But we've seen countries which have gone through that and it has worked well. So long as communication is done, they need to test. We've worked with countries and we'll be willing to work with Afghanistan if they start implementing, to go through the tests, to design the test. Peter will take you through all the questionnaires we've developed already, which can be a good starting point. And
Yeah, just Peter, maybe just to stop you. Not sure whether we will go through the whole questionnaire, but
But
yes,
at
I
least,
have sent it to them.
yeah,
I've sent it to them. Yeah.
you've sent it to them. Okay.
Yeah, I have sent it to them as you were talking,
Right.
so that they can look at some of the parts, because
Right.
I don't think we'll have time to go through the whole questionnaire. It's quite a
Indeed,
big one.
indeed, it's a big one, but at least the basics can.
Yeah, exactly. So, okay.
Yeah, and I think this is. I want to let you know that we have a website where you can get all our model questionnaires. This is the website. It has got a lot of information about the pilots which were done, and now we've added also a lot of documents on COVID, how to measure, how to handle things during COVID. So this is the website. And I think this was my last slide, unless you have any other question, or if my colleague wants to add on something. Any questions?
That's fine on my side, yeah.
Thanks, Peter. One a general comment or the suggestion. So that you have shared the link for the resources on the labor force service. We will definitely look at that link, and then we will see what resources are there. Is it possible, or your organization ILO, does it have kind of the programming or the codes or do files for the standard LFS survey questionnaire? So, for example, like we also work on with some other indicators, like in if you know the demographic and health service, they have a standard questionnaire, and then they also develop a good a library of codes in GitHub. So everyone can use their resources openly from the questionnaire, and how those questionnaire can be analyzed through those codes and programs that they also have. Does it have this kind of facility? ILO does it have this kind of facility of resources?
We do have adaptation manuals, which include some static codes to generate the kind of indicators you need, but it's in the manual. But of course, if you need any help of any sort, we can always work with the team. If there's any specific need, you really have, we are open to share all what we have. As Eve has already shared some of the do files, but in the adaptation manual, there are some codes for generating some of the indicators, which you can directly copy from the manual, and you apply them.
So just to add on, for those who will be implementing the 19th ICLS and our model questionnaire, yes, we have those guidance as well. So we have not only the manual, but we have the derivation variables, almost exactly like Eve was showing you yesterday. Eve was using specifically the starter code, but we have a variable derivation which you can transform into any software, SPSS or SAS or Stata. So the website you see here has all of them.
Okay, thanks. Thanks, Titi and Peter. Thanks. We will certainly look at this link.
Yeah. Any other question? I'm going to send the presentation. It's been a long presentation, but I will share it immediately. I'm going to send it. Any other question?
No, thank you.
So if there's no other question, then we can meet in the next 1 hour, or we can meet earlier, I don't know. In the next 1 hour to allow people to have lunch.
So,
It will be more better to meet after 1 hour.
After 1 hour, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.